In this lecture, we are going to learn the hover state and also the transition. Let's talk about what is the hover state. Hover state is a mouse effect when mouse is hover to an element that can be detected by pseudo classes, and one of the pseudo class is actually made for the mouse hover event. So what we are going to do here, we are going to use that and give a effect to this element. So let's add a pseudo class. So scroll down to the NameWrap. Here you can see, and copy it and paste it, and here we will add colon. We will say hover. By the colon and this hover mean that this is the pseudo class of CSS. There is another pseudo class which is active and visited. So we will only talk about hover because we mostly use this. So the hover state will only affect when the mouse is hover to the NameWrap. So we will say whenever the mouse is on the NameWrap div, give this CSS rule to that element. So we have grabbed the NameWrap and we have given the pseudo class of hover. So whenever the mouse is going to hover the NameWrap div, it will give this CSS rule which we are going to write here. So we will say background color. Let's say for the sake of the argument, we will say gray. And when we refresh the file, you can see it's given the gray color when I hover the NameWrap div. That is how pseudo class hover works. So let me give a more design to it. So we will add a border radius, and we will give a 50 pixels of border radius because we need to round the corner. As you can see in the finished project, the corner is round. So let's refresh the page, and you can see it's given the round corner. And we also want to add a padding to the NameWrap. So you can see here it has a more volume than this. So we are going to add a padding here. We will add padding, and I have given 3 pixel padding and save the file, and let's refresh the page. As you can see, it's given the padding, and that is much better. So let's add a different color. So the color that I am going to use here for now is F4 F6 FB, and when we save the file and when we refresh it, you will see the changes. You can see the color is now more lighter than before. In the later we will use a different color for this, but for now is much better. So let's talk about transition, because whenever we hover to this final project, you can see it gives a little bit a slow motion to this. As you can see, it changes the background but in a time duration. So we will give a transition property to achieve this. So when we want to give a transition to an element, we want to give a transition to a specific property. So whenever we want to give a transition, there is something that is need to be given that you want to give a transition to that. For example, here you can see we have changed the background from the white to this color. So you can see the background is white, and whenever we hover over to this element, the background changes to this background color. So this is the changing of the background. So we will add our transition, and we will say transition property, and we will add this. We will say we want to smoothly change the background property because we are changing on the hover state. So we will add a background property, and here we are going to use another property of transition duration, because transition duration property is set to 0 by defaultly. So if we use a transition property background here, which we have used it will not work because the transition duration property is set to 0. So we will add the transition duration property here, and we will give a time, and we can say 1, and when we add s here, you can see it will last for 1 second, and if we say 1 ms, it will say 1 millisecond. It will move so fast that we couldn't see. So we will add 1s to see the transition. So save the file, and when we refresh it, you can see it changes more smoothly. Let me change the color here, and we refresh the page. You can see it changes the background, but smoothly according to the time duration which is given here. Let's say we want to last our transition for 3 seconds. When we refresh the page, it will complete the transition in a 3 seconds. If we add more, it will complete the transition in that particular duration. In our case, it's 5 seconds. So what I've used here, I've said 200 millisecond. So when we refresh the page, it will end much faster than before. So let's change the color to the color which I have given before. So that color was F4, F6, FB, and when you save the file, and let's see what's happened. Here you can see is giving the transition more smoothly and more accurately to the NameWrap div. So let's say we don't need to use this property individually. Let's say we want to use a shorthand property of transition. So we'll remove this. Here we will add a transition, simple transition, and that is the transition shorthand property. And here we will add a value for the transition property, and we will say the property which we need to give a transition is background. So we'll say make a background transition, and on the second value will be the time duration. We will say 200 millisecond, and the third option is used to give a transition style. I will explain that later, but here just put a ease in and out. Basically this is one of the style of the transition, and there are other transition style, and in the later videos we will learn about the transition different style, but here this is the ease in and out style of the transition. So let's save the file, and when we refresh the page, you can see it gives the transition effect to this NameWrap div. So as you can see, the transition working very fine. That's it for now, and see you in the next lecture.